Breaking news. 0457 dark skies over Yemen. A captain in command of a C-17 that was supposed to deliver supplies turns into a key piece of the puzzle. She launches a drone, blocks enemy links, and coordinates an attack that pulverizes a Houthi base minutes before their swarm of drones and missiles could take off. Tactical genius that saved lives? Or an excessive use of power-blending transport and attack? Subscribe now if you think she did the right thing. And if not, stay tuned, because in moments you'll see how every minute counts, how an electronic module can turn drones into scrap before firing a single missile, and how a chain of detonations shut down the offensive before it was even born. At 4:15 local time, at Al Udeid Air Base, Qatar, a U.S. Air Force C-17 Globemaster III strategic transport aircraft, call sign Titan 42, sped down the runway under the command of Captain Elena Ramirez. A seasoned pilot with a reputation for a cool head, she led a crew consisting of First Lieutenant Michael Chen as co-pilot, Loadmaster Sergeant Miguel Torres, and Flight Engineer Sergeant Aisha Khan. The initial plan was straightforward. Move medical supplies, spare parts, and communications gear to an Allied facility in Djibouti, in the Horn of Africa. Clear skies, systems checked, nothing suggested a dramatic diversion. Takeoff rotation was clean, the climb stable, and the cockpit settled into the routine of cross-checks. Yet, in that unstable regional environment, normalcy rarely lasts, and every cruise leg can turn into a critical decision node. In the mountains of Saada, north of Sana'a, Yemen, a Houthi cell had been preparing for weeks, an escalated attack against a Saudi-Yemeni coalition outpost coordinating border intelligence and logistics. They had stockpiled Qasef 2K explosive drones, Zelzal, 2 short-range ballistic missiles, and improved data links using commercial terminals and adapted software packages, all backed by external advisors calibrating guidance and synchronization. Their goal: saturate defenses with a swarm of low-speed, low-signature UAVs, force radars, and operators to split attention, and finish with missiles to disable the command center and its communications network. Preparations included dispersing mobile launchers, camouflaging depots, and segmenting reserves to withstand initial losses. At 4:37, while the C-17 crossed the Red Sea at about 30,000 feet on a standard logistic profile, an urgent alert reached the operations system in Riyadh. Intercepted encrypted signals between Houthi operators and foreign advisors confirmed the imminent launch of a dozen drones armed with fragmentation warheads set to impact in under 20 minutes. Following that wave, a secondary ballistic salvo would exploit saturation. Though Patriot batteries and other defensive assets were active, the sheer number of vectors and their staggered timing threatened to overwhelm simultaneous tracking capacity. Command then made an unconventional decision: redirect Titan 42 for a hybrid mission. This C-17 carried on board an experimental ANLQ-249 electronic warfare package and an MQ-9 adapted for release through the rear ramp. An evaluation setup rather than a classic operational deployment, opening the possibility of using the transport aircraft as an intelligence accelerator and a preventive jamming node. Orders were to descend, penetrate low altitude into hostile airspace, deploy the drone to capture imagery, and fix targets for a group of F-15ES taking off from a Saudi base. The C-17 was never designed to loiter in areas threatened by man-portable missiles, but Ramirez accepted without hesitation, mentally adjusting maneuver margins and exit profiles. At 4:45, they adjusted course and began descending to about 5,000 feet, seeking to reduce radar visibility by masking against coastal terrain. Torres prepped the MQ-9, power, control surfaces, redundant data link, sensor check, CAN-monitored countermeasures, flares and chaff loaded and ready. Chen scanned for missile warnings or anomalies in the RWR. They advanced at high speed toward the critical zone, balancing haste with the need not to exceed structural limits in denser air. At 4:50, their radar picked up the first 6 Qasef 2Ks lifting from the mountain zone in a dispersed pattern, spreading laterally to complicate correlation. They flew at low speed and mid-altitude, designed to shorten defensive reaction time. Ramirez decided to release the drone immediately. The rear ramp opened, the MQ-9 detached, stabilized, climbed to about 15,000 feet, and activated its electro-optical and infrared sensors, feeding a continuous stream of imagery and telemetry. What it transmitted was a camouflaged hillside complex. Mobile launch platforms arranged in a semicircle, a depot with assembled drones and others in prep, containers possibly tied to missile bodies, and personnel moving quickly between charging stations. Coordinates were sent to Riyadh, and from there to the F-15ES, call sign Hammer 31, racing in on optimized entry profiles. To gain margin, Ramirez ordered a first preventive countermeasure burst, cascading flares creating decoy heat signatures and clouds of chaff strips designed to generate false returns and briefly saturate hostile tracking filters. The drone also identified a control node with linked terminals, a likely swarm management hub marked by improvised antennas and concentrated emissions. With the fighters still minutes away, the C-17 was detected and came under heavy machine gun fire from elevated positions. Tracers cut past at a limited but visible distance. Using terrain masking and disciplined throttle, the captain executed sharp turns and altitude shifts to stay outside favorable launch angles for manpads, minimizing exposure while maintaining link stability. Moments later, the transport's radar registered the launch of a Zelzal ballistic missile aimed at the Allied border post. With no interceptors in immediate position and the countdown to impact running, Ramirez authorized the jamming system. The electronic module swept pulses into link frequencies and possible guided channels, degrading navigation for part of the swarm. Several UAVs lost stability, veered erratically, and crashed before reaching effective routes. The missile, deprived of terminal corrections, deviated and struck an unpopulated area far from the command post, reducing collateral and structural risk. With that window gained, the F-15Es arrived around 0502 and executed a coordinated strike, employing precision-guided munitions on active launchers, the main depot, and the control node designated by the MQ-9. Primary blasts triggered secondary detonations of stored drones and missiles, lighting the hillside with flashes and spirals of smoke columns. Intercepts later confirmed the destruction of multiple ready drones, launchers, and key personnel, including technical advisors running the links. Still, the drones spotted movement at a secondary site, a convoy trying to shift missiles and launch gear to another safe zone before the next strike, signaling a continuity plan. Ramirez kept the C-17 at a prudent tactical altitude, managing ground fire risk while maintaining persistent surveillance. The fighters, after reprofiling and confirming remaining ordnance, returned minutes later with penetrator loads. They struck the convoy with direct hits, carving aligned craters and burning debris, eliminating the residual threat of immediate relaunch. Confirmed by imagery and the sharp drop in hostile electromagnetic activity, the group's offensive capacity was severely degraded. With the infrastructure neutralized and the Allied post out of danger, Titan 42 climbed back up and set course home, stair-stepping to safer altitudes. The crew, fatigued but aware of the outcome, had turned a logistics platform into a decisive detection, jamming, and targeting node in minutes. During egress, records of AN/ALQ-249 usage, expendables consumption, and a detailed timeline were consolidated for debriefing. Later reports highlighted the speed of decision-making and the integration of sensors, electronic warfare, and precision strike, underscoring the utility of employing non-traditional assets to close time gaps before dedicated means arrive. The enemy base, once a regional coordination hub, was reduced to smoking remains and visible craters in before and after imagery. Offensive activity dropped in the following weeks as the coalition reinforced surveillance, adjusted engagement rules, and reviewed dual-use protocols for transport platforms. Hours later, upon landing, Ramirez and her crew received informal recognition among Allied personnel. The internal narrative circulated as an example of operational adaptability, using what was at hand, a heavy transport, an onboard drone, and a trial electronic package, to foil a multi-axis attack. The episode stood as a reminder that in contemporary scenarios, the line between logistics support and direct action can blur when real-time intelligence, tactical flexibility, and multi-level coordination converge, and that early disruption of adversary attack architecture can equal physically neutralizing vectors before kinetic interception is required. An imminent attack was neutralized, yes, but by showing that a heavy transport can coordinate electronic warfare and ISR in the same sortie, does this not encourage future hostile forces to classify every cargo plane as a priority target? If tomorrow cheap drones with more autonomous navigation emerge, resistant to jamming, do we repeat the tactic or escalate to more direct responses? This may have saved lives or moved the red line. What's your take? Subscribe and leave your argument, adaptive doctrine or silent escalation.